Welcome, welcome everyone to this virtual celebration of Ustedes by Krzysztof Wodiczko in honor of International Migrants Day. I'm so excited to be celebrating Krzysztof tonight, an artist I so profoundly admire and with whom I've collaborated on a number of projects through the years. So thank you, Krzysztof, for sharing with us your mind, your heart, and your guts, as you always put it. I'm Michela Martegani, founder and director of More Art. I'm a slightly olive-skinned woman with pandemic long brown hair and brown eyes, wearing a blue flowered black shirt. We find each other here tonight at the end of a very trying year that has seen an international pandemic with unprecedented number of deaths, civil resistance and protests due to continued racial inequities, and a very bitter and divisive presidential election that never seems to be completely over. The coronavirus pandemic has laid bare inequalities that were deeply rooted in our society and especially evident in our treatment of immigrants, many of whom have been on the front line and disproportionately affected by the virus. This is what we are here to talk about tonight. However, before we start, I have to disclose that on a personal level, as an organization, we just suffered a serious blow. You may have read that the historical Middle Collegiate Church burned down 10 days ago. What you may not know is that our offices were housed there too, in the buildings next door that belongs to the church. And we were finally allowed in the building on Monday just to take stock of the fact that nothing was left. Our offices were buried under a wall of bricks and debris, and we couldn't save anything from computers, projectors, printers, cameras, to artworks donated by artists over the years, to our recently published books, to our 16-year archive. Everything is gone. So as we celebrate Ustedes tonight, we also mourn the larger loss of the church and our own personal one. This has been one crazy year for everybody, but as a community, it has helped us get stronger and ready for 2021. Thank you for listening. I'm now handing it over to our exceptional MC for the evening, our own Candy Store.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Michaela. Welcome to our virtual celebration of Ustedes, Them, by artist Krzysztof Wodiczko, presented by More Art in collaboration with Make the Road New York and the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. For those of you who don't know, More Art is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports collaborations between professional artists and communities to create public art and educational programs that inspire social justice. As Michaela mentioned, our organization has suffered an immeasurable setback in the devastating fire at Middle Collegiate Church in the East Village. These are very trying times indeed that have tested our resiliency. If you are able to make a tax-deductible donation to help More Art rebuild, donation information will be posted in the chat over the course of the evening. And like Michaela said, my name is Candy Store. I'm a good friend and former development assistant at More Art. I am a white-bodied, gender non-conforming person with long blonde hair and blue eyes. I'm wearing a black chiffon blouse with black velvet flowers. It kind of actually looks like Michaela's outfit. If you require captions throughout tonight's event, please turn on the live transcript option now at the bottom of your screen. I will be your MC for this evening's celebration, and I am so grateful for your attendance tonight. Before I get into our program, I'd like to emphasize that tonight is a celebration. in honor of both Krzysztof Wodiczko's work as well as International Migrants Day. This year, International Migrants Day falls on Friday, December 18th, which is tomorrow. Established in 1990 by the United Nations, the day recognizes the fundamental rights and freedoms of all migrants as essential to the growth and development of both countries of origin and countries of destination. The day underscores that international migration is not only a growing phenomenon, but it is vital to strengthening international cooperation. In honor of International Migrant Day and Ustedes, Them, we dedicate this evening to the stories and lives of migrant people. Tonight's program will begin with a short video presentation about Ustedes, Them. After the screening, we will hear from the artist, Krzysztof Wodiczko, as well as two participants who will share their experiences working on Ustedes, Them. We will then welcome our distinguished panelists, Angelis Solis, lead organizer of the Workplace Justice Team at Make the Road New York, alongside Commissioner Bitta Mustafi of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. The conversation will be moderated by Emma Drew, editorial assistant at More Art, and will be followed by a short Q&A with our audience. The duration of tonight's event will be about 65 minutes long. So, Ustedes, Them by Krzysztof Wodiczko launched in October 2020 on Governor's Island in New York City. In this project, Wodiczko co-ops drone technology, often employed by governments for border surveillance operations, as a medium to broadcast the voices and perspectives of immigrants and refugees. The artist interviewed immigrants from Latin American countries about their experiences in the United States. In a filmed performance on Governor's Island on October 3rd, 2020, just ahead of the 2020 presidential elections, 4 drones equipped with 2 screens showing the eyes of the participants and a megaphone-like mouth flew and interacted with each other in a choreographed, airborne conversation addressing American immigration issues. While the eyes and voices created a direct connection with the audience, the drones disguised identifying features and guaranteed anonymity. A little bit about Krzysztof Wodiczko. Krzysztof was born in 1943 in Warsaw, Poland, and now lives and works in New York City. He is a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Design in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where he directs the Art, Design, and Public Domain program. He was formerly director of the Center for Advanced Visual Studies and the Interrogative Design Group at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he was a professor in the Visual Arts program since 1991. He also teaches as a senior lecturer in the psychology department at the Warsaw School of Social Psychology. On behalf of More Art, I'd like to thank Krzysztof Wodiczko for bringing us this impactful and poignant work and for sharing it with our New York City audience during such an uncertain and tumultuous time. I'd also like to extend the utmost of gratitude to our courageous participants, Amador and Carolina, who will join us a little later this evening. We will now watch a short video introducing Ustedes, Them. The narrator in the video is Krzysztof Wodiczko, setting the stage for his October 2020 performance on Governor's Island. The video has its own captions, so if you are using the live transcript feature, feel free to turn it off during the video. After the video, Krzysztof will join us and share a short statement about the project. In honor of International Migrants Day, please join me in the celebration of Krzysztof Wodiczko's work presented to you by More Art. I give you Ustedes, Them.
When we say them, we of course are thinking about those others than ourselves. And those others are usually the ones who are in a much more difficult situation than ourselves. In order to maintain symmetry of politics, one must focus on asymmetry of ethics. In the present day, when we look at the situation of strangers, it's even more important to bring this ethics of technology. There's authorities of various kinds who try to monitor the movement of those who are not immediately welcome or who are suspects.
Una oportunidad como esta de salir de mi país.
No sabía si podía regresar o no.
It's very appropriate to what we said.
Mi nombre es Amado Rivas y vengo de Cuba.
This surveillance by drones also affects strangers, foreigners, and refugees. We see them from the point of view of the drone. What art can do to help us to open up and listen. Curiosity means empathy. There's a difference between empathy and sympathy. You have to recognize the situation of those people, what they went through. So, one possibility to see the use of drones here is the function is to disperse to the air of absurdity, the fear of strangers and newcomers, but also create a position in which we have to look up to them. But what we keep forgetting, that surveillance is not, as much as power itself, cannot be owned by anybody. One could say nobody owns the power.
Mi nombre es Dionisio Rafael Arambol Paulino, soy dominicano.
Mi jefe se ganó mi confianza y ella solamente me decía, tranquila, Caro, yo te voy a pagar cuando los edificios paguen. Y pues los edificios pagaban, pero ella a mí no me pagaba. Hasta que decidí recurrir a un abogado.
Después de mi accidente, mi jefe no se pronunció ante mí a decirme qué necesitaba o si tenía una dolencia o algún dolor.
If you take $50, they register something else out of the restaurant, it's a criminal act, right? If your boss take 40 minutes out of all the employees, it's just a labor case.
Pero como digo, el amor que yo le tengo a mis hijas pues me obligó a ver la necesidad que había, pues decidí salir a las calles a vender aguas, a recoger reciclaje y pues como dije, el amor de mis hijas fue lo que más me mantuvo fuerte. No me voy a dar por vencida.
Strangers and immigrants are monitoring us every day. Why? They monitor the way they're being treated, the way they feel uncomfortable or estranged or not understood, not heard. And they know intuitively that the way they are treated is the measure of democracy for everybody.
Hello, good evening. I hope you can hear me well. My name is Krzysztof Wodiczko. I'm wearing glasses, and I have a gray hair. And if I turn my head, you might see my ponytail. And I'm wearing a black sweater, golf, with some scarf, which has a very tiny pattern made of tiny eyes. So, of course, I'm extremely happy to be able to join the celebration of Migrant Day, and also like to thank More Art and all the team to help, especially Michaela and Tiani, for helping with development of this project. But the question I like to focus on here is technology. Of course, I will elaborate on some things that I mentioned that are you could hear on the little video presented before I began speaking now. The question is, why drones? Because it is a mobile and global technology associated with, and in fact, most suitable for crossing geographic and political boundaries and borders. And because the drones, also are implicated in the situation of migrants. The performance and appearance of them corresponds to the mobile and global experience of migrants and to their global and mobile perspective on the world. Because drones are implicated in migrant lives, involved in monitoring and controlling their movement, implicated in migrant lives because they in fact are controlling the future of migrants. And also because drones, mobile and media communication technology can culturally equip, protect, and empower and arm the migrants in hostile social zones, play a role, help them to play survival tactics, and also contribute to advancement. Well, I will try to, of course, elaborate on this more during the questions and answer period. But in fact, monitoring the migrants' appearance and movements, the drone technology is used to control and ultimately take charge of their lives and their future. At the same time, when used by border control forces at the service of xenophobic authorities, the drones help to create and disseminate a dehumanized public image and perception of migrants as the hordes of invaders, either hopeless or hostile. So I ask myself the question, why not creating cultural and social and media conditions for migrants to use the same drone technology to allow them to take charge of the public image and public perception, presenting and representing themselves by themselves in a novel and rightful democratic attempt to advance their visibility and their human presence, their will, and the right of emancipation. With their bodies and faces invisible, only their eyes for us to see, and with their lips replaced by megaphones, they seem technologically fit for cultural frontline mission, masked and protected from a danger with facial recognition, hostility and potential deportation, but well equipped to speak at the same time, to be heard while well camouflaged, they can safely share and broadcast from the sky the truth of their experience and take a risk to look straight at our eyes, bravely return our gaze. They arm with multiple wing-like drone propellers with their open, bright eyes. They have seen a larger world, notoriously at its worst, and with their magnified voice to convey their lived through experience, the migrants like seraphim, a special class of angels, the seraphim, can become techno-angelic creatures who prophetically speak to us from the sky. They, like all migrants, know well how to navigate between heavenly ethics and earthly existential politics. Well, they can wish to testify to the wrong that they have been suffering and witnessing in order to save the world from the perpetuation of such suffering in the future. Honest, fearless, while playful and performative, public appearance of the migrant as a drone might disarm and disperse, that's what I hope, into the thin air, a fearful prejudice against them and an apprehensive reception of them, and the very seriousness of such fear. So such psychological and artistic objective must be, I think, further tested in hostile xenophobic territories, in this country and in other countries and other places.
Thank you for that, Krzysztof. This is very poetic and beautiful. We will now be joined by two of the project's participants, Amador and Carolina, who will share their experiences working on Ustedes, them. Amador and Carolina will tell their stories in their native language, and an English translation will be posted in the chat dialogue box, should you need that. First, we will hear from Amador.
My name is Amador Rivas. Put the cam. Okay. My name is Amador Rivas. I from Cuba. Salí hace 25 años porque no porque tenía diferencia con el sistema, sino por otros motivos. Después de ir a la oficina de interés a buscar visa para viajar, visitar a una hermana que estaba enferma, que no veía por más de 30 años, estaba con cáncer. El funcionario en la entrevista me dijo que no podía viajar a Estados Unidos porque podría ser un posible emigrante. Yo le dije no, voy a ser un emigrante a la fuerza por muchos motivos que en ese momento estaban ocurriendo en Cuba. Y finalmente sí, fui un inmigrante a la fuerza. La historia es larga, por lo que no puedo contarla aquí. Cuando llegué aquí pude reafirmar lo que siempre supe en mi país: las diferencias sociales, la desigualdad, la pobreza, el racismo, la explotación, etcétera, están presentes también con mucha fuerza en el país más poderoso del mundo, donde las riquezas están concentradas solo en el 1% de la población, de la sociedad. Por eso vine con la convicción de incorporarme también a la lucha por justicia social, porque en mi país, a pesar de dificultades económicas producidas por el más largo y cruel bloqueo que conozca la historia, se han logrado grandes avances sociales y grandes conquistas, especialmente en el campo de la educación, la salud, el arte, la cultura, el bienestar social, etc. Como migrante hice todo tipo de trabajo. También fui explotado y discriminado. Por eso me solidarizo y lucho junto con el resto de mis compañeros en una lucha más fuerte contra la desigualdad, el racismo, la persecución de nuestros hermanos inmigrantes y para que nuestra gente tenga una mejor calidad de vida.
Thank you, Amador. Oh, and your video is back. Perfect. Next, we will hear from Carolina. Great. Hi, Carolina. Amador, you can close your video.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Carolina, tengo 36 años. Llegué a este país por desplazamiento forzoso de mi país porque me hacían extorsiones y tenía amenazas de muerte. Entonces, por eso llegué a este país. En este momento laboro por días cuando pues se me permite, pues debido al COVID. Agradezco estos espacios porque nos permiten alzar las voces de una manera sana, sin usar violencia, donde podemos ser escuchados. No somos juzgados ni criticados, sino por lo contrario somos apoyados. Entonces, por eso me gusta participar en este tipo de encuentros o actividades culturales. Y muchas gracias.
Thank you, Carolina. And thank you, Amador, again, for sharing your experiences. Now I'd like to, sorry, am I back? Okay. Now I'd like to welcome our panelists, Angelis Solis, lead organizer of the Workplace Justice Team at Make the Road New York, as well as Commissioner Bitta Mostafi of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. Both will be in a conversation moderated by Emma Drew, editorial assistant at More Art. If you have any questions for our speakers tonight, please post them using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We have set aside some time after the conversation in which our speakers will answer your questions. So please help me welcome Angelis Solis, Commissioner Mostafi, and Emma Drew.
Thank you so much, Candy Store. Thank you all for being here. Thank you especially to Angelis and Commissioner Mostafi. I'm Emma Drew. I am the editorial assistant at More Art. I am a white-bodied, female-presenting person with cropped brown hair, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck. Angelis Solis is the lead organizer of Workplace Justice at Make the Road, who was the partner organization with More Art from Ustedes. It's an organization that does many things, but is always in the role of advocating for and organizing for migrant workers, migrant rights, as well as other working class communities. Commissioner Bitta Mostafi is from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs for the City of New York, also doing a lot of things. But tonight, I would like to start with Angelis. First question I wanted to get the ball rolling with was about Ustedes and about Make the Road's relationship to More Art and to public art, and what that experience was like for you as an organizer and you as an organization. How do you guys see public art fitting into your goal of empowering and mobilizing immigrant communities?
That's a great question. I hope everyone can hear me all right. Awesome. So I can introduce myself, Angelis Solis, lead organizer. Thank you, Emma, for that introduction. I'm a young, able-bodied, first-generation woman, brown eyes, brown hair, wearing a black sweater and green headphones. And before I answer that question, I'll speak a little bit to Make the Road and why your question is so key to the work that we do. We are one of the largest community organizations in the country, with over 24,000 members organizing for dignity and justice across New York. We organize with our sister organizations across 5 states. We fight for tenants, for workers, for immigrants, for our elderly, for our young. We fight for universal health care. We fight to decriminalize sex work. We're taking on the real looters in our country, like Jeff Bezos and the billionaires, for the harm done to our people and the planet. We fight to defund the police and invest in el barrio. We fight to protect the democracy we have left, and we recognize that all of these fights are interconnected and center the leadership of those most impacted as we build the road. And art and storytelling are essential threads to all of these campaigns. Popular education styles mean incorporating the talents and stories of our membership. I think the Youth Power Project in particular, Make the Road, is a very strong example of youth-led activism, political consciousness, and advocacy, and incorporates art and storytelling along the way. We also work with many volunteer photographers and videographers that contribute their skills to our various campaigns, to the movement, to our base. And just one example, last week, Make the Road had the privilege of working with Ange Tran, an artist who created a 650-foot, 3-block wide scroll demonstrating the massive gains of New York billionaires and how there's more than enough wealth in our state to take care of everyone in this crisis. And rolling out a 700-foot tarp across Central Park was not easy. It was only possible because our members came in and took that space and wanted to demonstrate this is what several billion looks like, and we have nothing.
Yeah, that kind of the logistical part of that is something we're well attuned to here as well. That sounds amazing. Commissioner Mustafi, I'm kind of going off of what Angeles was just describing. How does your office, first of all, I guess, work with organizations or and in line with organizations like Make the Road, whether that's in these artistic spheres that we're here kind of celebrating tonight, or in kind of a broader sense? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that relationship.
Sure. Thank you for having me and for putting this event on. I'm an Iranian American woman and present as a female. I have dark curly hair, but it's up in a bun, so you can't see so much. And I'm wearing a tan sweater or brown. Maybe I need to check my own coloring. So my office is the city's agency that is responsible for promoting programs and policies that advance the inclusion of immigrant New Yorkers. So super broad work that we do, but really exciting to be able to do this in a city that's so diverse as New York. Nearly 40% of our population is foreign-born. When you add in their children and families, that's 60% of New Yorkers who hail from all over the globe, speak over 200 languages. That's a super conservative estimate of the languages spoken, have all different immigration statuses, and really contribute to the fabric of who our cities are, including our essential workers who have been on the front lines of this pandemic. So our job is very often one of convening and partnership. So partnership internally within our city apparatus of agencies, and partner externally with community-based providers like Make the Road, which is a central partner to much of what we do, as well as institutions like libraries, cultural institutions across our city, and so forth. So we really see ourselves as both the connectors of a lot of the work in terms of what the city can be doing and should be doing, and sort of pushing that envelope for our communities, and ensuring that in what we are doing, we're prioritizing all of the disparities that Angeles noted, right? Economic inequalities and injustices, health inequities, making sure that people have access to due process, making sure that they have access to justice programs, and ensuring that the work that we are doing are advancing sort of greater equity and justice for our communities, but also civic integration and participation in being a more inclusive New York. So a lot of what we do does connect with community providers. We have partnerships on legal services programs, on rights education work, in our city's healthcare initiative, NYC Care, which is available to all New Yorkers regardless of status, and all of our outreach and community engagement work. So ensuring that the city is showing up, sharing resources and information, and not letting bureaucracy or language or trust sort of be the barrier to accessing things that people have the right to, and that the city should affirmatively be making sure is in the right hands of our community.
Thank you. That like I imagined, a lot to do. To turn our attention, of course, to the pandemic. You know, it's a fact that immigrant communities, particularly in New York, but certainly across the globe, really have been disproportionately hardest hit by the pandemic, and whether that's related to exposure risk and contraction rates, or job security, and their various access to healthcare. I'd like to hear a little bit more, actually, from both of you, and kind of both as you represent kind of two different, two sides of the same coin, or two sides of the good fight, how the pandemic has kind of affected particularly labor practices and relationships to work. Obviously, Ustedes, the stories told really focus on the precarity of work for a lot of migrants, and whether that's your undocumented or documented folks, and some of the injustices kind of specifically within the workplace. So maybe Commissioner Mustafi, I'm wondering how the pandemic, to start with you, has affected, or if it's affected kind of your approach, your office's approach to labor policy and kind of workplace conditions and basically all of those issues.
Yeah, so you know, it has been a really challenging 4 years of the Trump administration, and really the pandemic layered sort of on top of that, and the sort of challenges exposed a lot of the disparities and injustices that we know exist. You rightly stated, in New York City, right, the impact on Black and Brown communities was 1.5 times, 2 times as great as other communities. And you know, our team did a layering of that data that our Department of Health released, and looked specifically at immigrant dense populations in our city, and it's really you know, just starkly evident that immigrant dense communities were much more likely to be impacted in terms of rates of COVID, but also rates of death. And I know, you know, express my condolences to Angelis and the Make the Road family. I know so many members of Make the Road, for instance, lost their lives because of this pandemic. And I think it speaks to a lot of the failures, right, of our system, and the way that kind of pre-existing conditions or health access or nutrition and so forth have in our communities spiraled in a way that result in people being more susceptible to this kind of an illness, right? And passing away from it instead of being able to be treated for it and recover from it. And economically, we also did an analysis, which is available on our website, nyc.gov/immigrants, looking at our essential workforce and really isolating or demonstrating that immigrants were more likely to be in jobs or in positions where they were either on the front lines, right, essential workers, and or most likely to lose employment or not have their rights sort of protected, right? And so this is actually an area of work that we've been focused on for some time in partnership with our Department of Consumer and Worker Protection in developing materials as well as policy guidance that speaks to the rights of workers in the workplace, regardless of immigration status, and actually working alongside advocates and other organizations like Make the Road to advance laws like the paid sick leave law, which is what all workers have the right to regardless of status. Laws like the right to advance work, right, schedules, and making sure that people have awareness of that. Policy guidance around discrimination in workplace to make sure that you're not discriminated against because of your immigration status. So this is an area actually that we've been, for the last, I think, 3 years, really doing even more work on in partnership with our sister organizations and community providers, actually developing kind of rights curricula around this and being in communities to share this information, but also materials in multiple languages for folks. And then the last thing I'll say is we have had fought for the continuation of, and we're successful. We have a low wage worker initiative that really seeks to provide legal representation for immigrant workers and undocumented workers so that they can exercise their rights, right, and seek the right justice if their employer is denying them, and Make the Road is one of our legal partners in that effort. So those are all critical, both existing initiatives, but ones that we saw certainly at this moment, just the volume of need and the breadth of the challenge as being really, really great.
Yeah, that I'm super curious to hear kind of on the ground side of things too, Angeles. How are you seeing those, either some of the things that the commissioner noted come enacted, or what are you hearing from your members really about, again, specifically kind of about the work, the intersection of this kind of new but with long-standing workplace precarity that exists for immigrant communities?
Right. And I really want to back up everything that Commissioner Bitta has said and acknowledge the incredible efforts of both city and state agencies trying to enforce workers' rights in this moment, where billionaire employers, corporations have just taken advantage of the fear so many folks have right now, and especially when it comes to losing their jobs. Right. So to just give two concrete examples, I'll focus on our delivery worker membership and our warehouse worker membership. At the beginning of the pandemic, all of the delivery workers in our membership survived COVID, but many of their peers didn't. And as Commissioner Bitta mentioned, we've lost 85 members to this organization, and we're fighting like hell to make sure we don't lose any more to the failures of our state leadership for not providing emergency income relief, an eviction-free moratorium that's real. And at the end of the day, so many of the members in our delivery workforce had no choice but to keep working. 90% of delivery workers in New York are foreign-born, and almost 3/4 of that population are undocumented. So that means that the same people who are putting their lives at risk to bring food to hospital workers, to families trying to get by on Zoom in their homes, and they themselves as essential workers are excluded from life critical benefits. So particular to delivery workers, but this is something that we saw for domestic workers, for nannies, for sex workers, for the service workers, the majority of those in our membership. It was the lack of proper protective equipment right away. It was the lack of enforcement around paid sick leave, paid sick law, as you mentioned. But we also saw a lot of retaliation for the first time. Not the first time, but there was a striking moment where many vulnerable immigrant workers, although in a precarious situation, were more scared of losing their life than of losing their job at certain moments. So we saw this upsurge in grassroots organizing in the workplace, and we were fielding calls regularly around, how do I protect myself at work? What are my rights? What do I say to my boss? What do I say to my coworkers? So we immediately responded with a series of virtual webinars, but also campaign literature, online literature on how to protect yourself at work. We also are doing the same in terms of the raids that have continued in our communities from ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, and the police. Again, criminalization, surveillance, that has only augmented on an already exploited workforce. And I'll end with saying that just today, the National Labor Relations Board ruled that one of our members was unjustly fired, essentially for speaking up and for being Black. And he supported the walkout with his fellow Amazon warehouse workers. We supported in early March and April. And for the first time, the federal government is stepping in to say that what Amazon did in firing this worker was wrong. But that is one victory, and that is often rare. And we do not see that on the day-to-day basis that we need. And I'll end with saying our people were in crisis before. Low-wage immigrant workers have been exploited despite making millions and billions for these corporations that are thriving in this moment, are the ones most likely to get exposed, to get sick, and have no social safety net to fall on if they do.
Yeah. Here. Thank you for sharing those specific examples, especially. I mean, one thing that you two both kind of mentioned that's super important, but is kind of how we communicate all of these things to those in need, and kind of also part and parcel of the project and how we're having this celebration today is obviously the kind of the use of social media in the broader scope. And one thing that I think More Art was curious about, as an organization focused on public and community engagement, it's been very hard to not be able to engage with the public, to convene, as Commissioner Mostafi kind of alluded to, and how which really forced us to reconceptualize and reconfigure how we connect with the public and with communities who we want to engage with. And so I was just curious, kind of in both of your roles and both of your organizations or offices, what tools you're using to maintain awareness and connect with your members or your constituents. Ustedes is the first time we've done a project that's been basically solely accessible online. And I'm just be curious to hear, we only have a few more minutes before, or a couple more minutes before the Q&A, so maybe we can turn to this, but I'm kind of how you guys are dealing with that, changing to that, the virtual space and connecting with people in a different way than we've been able to previously. Angeles or whoever wants to jump in.
Sure, I'm happy to start. I'll be brief. We have tried to really reimagine sort of how we do our work in this way. And so a lot of that, particularly in the spring, went virtual, but also recognizing there's a digital divide, there's a tech divide, right? All of those things. So our team really focused in a few different ways. One, community and ethnic media is something that we focus a lot on and are really proud of the work that we do with, but we leveraged in a different way, right? We did regular briefings live, we did regular email briefings for folks, we created materials that could be utilized in print or on television or media. Our team developed either audio, video or graphic information sharing in different languages that were used, yes, online like Facebook and other, but also through phone like chat systems like WeChat, WhatsApp, and Kakao Talk, kind of based on population, right? And focused dissemination of information in those ways. And then we also did outreach and continue to try to do some of this, right, in person at food pantries. We partnered with a network of community providers, including Make the Road, to distribute information in different languages through an immigrant resource guide that we created and have had translated into 25 languages. And we work with the city's meal hubs, of which there have been 100 across the city, to ensure that those guides are also available for people to pick up as they're coming to get their food in the right languages. So those are some of the ways that we sort of shifted our model of engagement, but certainly there are others, and we kind of continue to try to look at what is and isn't working.
Yeah. Angeles, how are you guys staying in touch with everybody?
It was a significant challenge to move an entire 5-office operation where members are coming in, there's childcare, there's food, there's legal consults, there's community meetings, there's art workshops, all of that to a virtual organizing space and a services space was a huge shift. And the team of folks that Make the Road did an incredible job of making sure that both staff and members had infrastructure to plug into to learn critical information. So we hit the ground running with virtual Facebook Live webinars where you can still access really critical information around your rights, health services, mental health advocates, workshops, and more. There's just a range of issues can be found on the Make the Road Facebook and website. We got to work along with city agencies and partners and ensuring that there was culturally relevant and accessible multilingual information shared with our membership. So a lot of what Commissioner Betta mentioned are the services that have supported our communities, but we did mass Zoom trainings on how to sign up for Zoom so that we could have virtual organizing spaces and members could plug in every week to get community, to get time to hear from their neighbors that they weren't being able to see in person, but also access really critical information. And I think we got creative. We our food pantries doubled in need right away as soon as the majority of Make the Road members, 9 out of 10 members, lost income and lost work. So through the food pantries, we've been able to distribute not just campaign information, capturing testimonies and real life experiences, but making sure people have the information that they need to survive in this pandemic. We even formed a mutual aid bike brigade with volunteer cyclists across the city to deliver essential items. So from mutual aid efforts to larger distributed cash assistance, legal support, and more. We've basically talking to members probably more than before the pandemic.
Right, well, there you go. Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. No, the kind of, it's true that reconceptualization of community is so crucial, and it's really amazing kind of all the different forms that ends up taking out of necessity and, like you said, kind of out of ingenuity. Thank you both so much. I'm going to open up the floor, as it were, to some Q&A time. And for this portion, Krzysztof is going to join us as well. So to audience members, for those of you who haven't had a chance yet, if you want to find that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can type in your question. You can tell me who you want to direct it to, everyone or a particular panelist, and I'll do my best to get through what we can. We're only going to be here for about 10 minutes. So I did want to start, we had a few that came in kind of over the course of the event and leading up to it. And I did want to actually start with one for Krzysztof about making art and particularly public art and this particular project in at the height of the pandemic. What was that like? And what was that like in terms of community engagement as well? So maybe Angelis, you could follow up after Krzysztof tells us a little bit about this experience of public art in times of the pandemic.
Well, obviously, what we hear convey via drones is part of the answer. Of course, there are definitely two people directly speak about their, actually three, who actually are affected by the epidemics. In fact, what I just heard from Angeles Solis helps me to understand the larger context. You know, our specific experiences are actually even more painful to remember and listen to. Mm-hmm. In terms of the organization of this event, it was profoundly affected because of the rules and regulations on government island that limit number of people who can gather. And so it was not the usual crowd that would spontaneously gather. There were some people who joined us who were not invited in any form, but people were sitting in the proper distance from each other. But also the timing of the event was determined by the epidemics, because we had to leave the island at a particular time, according to the rules affected by the COVID. So we had to present the project in the probably most uninviting conditions, because it's very hard to see what was on those screens, because we had to, it was in full sunlight, the brightest actually afternoon. We're hoping to have some clouds, because the project actually is designed to appear during time of sunset, and then gain certain momentum when it's darker and darker, and and repeated several times, as it was originally done in a completely different context, of course, right, in Milan. Now it all started with full sunshine. So still, to my surprise, those eyes were visible, as if there were, as an act of revenge against the situation. They were bright enough, but most importantly, the sound became prominent. Actually, the voice became much more important than in previous presentations. And I realized that public was focusing on every word being said, even if most of us did not know Spanish. But there was a translation. There was this, but even without fully understanding every word, there was a commitment to listen. And that's very important part of this kind of work. Mm-hmm. It's not only to be able to create conditions for people to speak, but also create conditions for the public to listen. It was definitely listening spectacle. So I'm extremely very happy with this outcome, because what people say is most important to hear.
Yes, and I know that you are always talking about, yes, the becoming an active, right, the catharsis of speaking, but also the importance of listening. Angeles, I'm curious kind of on when working, with with your members and who became participants, and kind of in this very charged moment where I imagine also kind of doing something out of the ordinary might be a little bit scary. I find it scary.
No, I have to add something, that the recordings were taking place at distance using Zoom, using iPhone and laptops. So this is really for the first time that this crucial part of the project happened without the direct contact.
Right.
Direct contact was so important to develop atmosphere of trust, and also sharing the intermediate space of a studio that doesn't belong to any of us and creates kind of extraterritorial space to open up, actually really a public space for us to open up and share it. So that was an obstacle, of course, but again, focusing on overcoming this obstacle actually helped the project as well.
Great. Angeles, did you have anything that you wanted to add from your guys' side of things, or from that you kind of maybe heard or saw happening with some of your members?
I can be brief. And I really liked what you said, Krzysztof, when you said not only do we need to create conditions for people to speak, but for the public to listen. And at the beginning of the pandemic, yes, it was full blown. No offices were open. We were not encouraging members to mobilize. But over time, we saw that the conditions for the base were so desperate. The man, he said, even Amador on this call said, what's the point of me being home if it's going to happen to me anyway? Like, we're being forced to mobilize. And since the start of COVID, we've organized, I want to say 17 demonstrations across a variety of campaigns. And one of the most notable ones that I'll end with was in July, we organized over 100 excluded workers, domestic workers, day laborers, street vendors across our wide coalition, from Street Vendor Project, National Day Laborers Network, Daisy's Rising Up and Moving, big coalition in this city and this state, brought excluded workers and undocumented immigrants to the foot of Jeff Bezos's door. And we slept on the concrete outside of his home, and we participated in a fast for 24 hours at the foot of the billionaire's home to bring the struggle with kids, young children in a pandemic, to show the desperation. And that really was a turning point in our campaigns where members said, this is a risk, but I'm already in danger. The fact that I can't pay my rent, I'm in danger. The fact that my boss is abusing us at work, I am in danger. And we've been forced to mobilize in order to bring attention, not just to the public, but to the people in power that can change things.
Yeah, totally. That's so, I mean, that organized group gathering when it's explicitly not in your best interest, is truly a powerful act. Commissioner Mostafi, we had a question also submitted that's perhaps a little bit broader, but how has immigration policy, this one asks, affected Latinx artists in New York City during the pandemic, but perhaps you could speak more to just, other immigrant artists, or, and then maybe also Angeles has maybe a bit more of a specific answer for folks more in the Latinx community. But yeah, how has immigration policy affected artists, immigrant artists in the city during the pandemic?
I mean, I want to just echo, this is not my role in this particular panel, but the importance of public art and the utilization of art in being able to lift up issues, voices, advocacy, and to sort of yield or demand attention, I think is something that we certainly as an office have valued in the work that we do, and recognize how important that is, We often say, or the general we, when you leave something, you don't necessarily remember the thing that you heard, but you remember the way you felt, or the emotion that it sparked in you. And that ability for sort of the art or the kind of concepts of what art can do is really critical to shift the moment we're in the narrative around immigration, which has very often been so negative, the xenophobia, the racism, right? And being truthful to sort of people and dignity and respect and families, right? And so I really appreciate the project and the conversation. And I would say, you know, artists in general, gig workers, right? This has been a very difficult moment in time. I know people who I would have considered very successful Latinx artists really struggled, right, at this moment. They lost sort of all sources of income. So across the board, I think this pandemic has really been challenging for artists and alike, all immigrant or not. And this is a population where certainly the city has looked at different ways of providing some assistance, but I know it's not nearly enough. And we've had just abysmal response from the federal government to recognize the challenge. There is ongoing advocacy led by groups like Make the Road and others to ensure a more inclusive package for COVID relief. And now is really the time to make your voices heard on that and to ensure that localities and people get the resources that we need for survival.
Totally. Thank you. Very well said. I do think that we have come to the end of our kind of discussion portion of the evening. I know it went too quick because there is so much to be talked about, but I want to thank all three of you greatly for sharing your thoughts and your time with us. And I will turn it over back to Candy Store and Michaela to help us kind of send us off at the end of the celebration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma. And thank you again, Angelis Solis with Make the Road New York and Commissioner Bitta Mustafi and Krzysztof Wodiczko for the insightful conversation. Now I'd like to turn it over to Michaela Martigani, Executive Director and Chief Curator at More Art, who will share a little more with you about what More Art has planned for our next year.
Thank you, Candy Store. And thank you everyone for the great conversation. So now it's the exciting part where I announce what we have in store for 2021, which has been made possible through all your help. So first, Public Water by Mary Mattingly. After A Year of Public Water campaign, in which every week for a year we've been posting on social media and a dedicated website highlights of the history of New York City water supply system, and have examined ongoing issues of water quality, access, privatization, and infrastructure, we will be finally unveiling Mary's sculpture, a water filtering geodesic dome, accompanied by a performance in Prospect Park in April. Then we are planning to open an ambitious project called Mine Forged Manacles, Manacles Forged Mine by Fred Wilson in Brooklyn in the fall, COVID permitting. It is a large interactive sculpture composed of layers of decorative ironwork and fencing. This complex mesh of wrought iron fences and bars will at times evoke prison bars and at other times gated communities. So who is looking in, who's looking out, who's free, who's trapped? These are some of the questions posed by this wonderful project by Fred Wilson. And now it is with great pleasure that I will announce the selection of the new cohort of fellows and residents for the Engaging Artists program for 2021. Engaging Artists is an umbrella program that includes a one-year professional development program for 8 fellows and the opportunity to fully develop a socially engaged work in the public space for 1 resident. So with no further ado, here are the 8 fellows for 2021. Hyperlink Press, Amy Ritter, Chantal Fetosa, Hane Utamura, Belle Feyerios, Emmy Wedge, Freya Powell, and Andrew Freeband. And the one resident chosen by an outside jury amidst a very stiff competition is our own current fellow, Sean Desiree. So congratulations to all. And as we come to a close, I would like to meditate for just one moment on the fact that the coronavirus has brought the world to a halt like nothing else could. There is no return to normality, acting as if nothing happened. Something did happen, and nothing could be worse than a return to normality. Historically, actually, pandemics, although painful, have forced humans to break with the past and imagine the world anew. The Black Death in the Middle Ages brought millions of deaths, but then the severe reduction in the workforce led to better working conditions for the poor and ultimately helped end serfdom. While the 1918 pandemic resulted in countries more widely embracing preventive and socialized medicine. So this one should be no different. The world that we will build after this pandemic is up to us. We can choose to maintain the hatred and the status quo, or we can imagine our place anew. Artists can help us do that. As you said already, we do believe in the vision of artists. I'm not saying that art is the only solution, but artists help think about issues in ways that are less inflexible and more experimental. They can be fearless and unapologetic. They can break cycles of entrenched dogmatism and intolerance. And so here, we pledge to continue to work with artists, to think with them, to listen, and do all we can to shape this vision. And this year, for better or for worse, we can literally walk through lightly with little to no luggage left, but ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So thank you for joining us on this journey.
As Michaela said, 2020 has been an unprecedented year, and it's united the world by tragic circumstances and tested the resilience of humankind. The devastating fire at Middle Collegiate Church earlier this month has presented this new challenge for the More Art community. And now more than ever, we call on our community to help us rebuild and move forward. If you are able, please consider making a donation to More Art by following the link in the chat, or you can text REBUILD 2021, that's REBUILD 2021, to the number 44321. That information will also be in the chat. On behalf of More Art, this has been so amazing, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this event and this panel. I extend a heartfelt thanks to all of our participants tonight. And we are so grateful to you, our audience, for joining us in celebrating this work, Ustedes, Them, by artist Krzysztof Wodiczko, in honor of International Migrants Day. I hope you all stay safe and take good care. Stay warm if you're in New York, and have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much.